Hey folks, it's Tech Tuesday. This is Rick Uzzi, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about broadband in 2020, one specific topic, and I'll be right back. Hey, this is Rick Uzzi. Again, welcome to Tech Tuesday and welcome to 2020. That sounds a little like Barbara Walters, I know, but it is a new decade. And that's really hard to believe. So here we are at 2020, and there's been a lot that's changed. Just think about the last decade. Maybe I should do a broadcast on that, everything that's changed over the last 10 years. But things are really exciting in the broadband market. There's a lot going on right now, and we're going to cover a little bit of that today. In fact, today what we're going to be talking about is 5G. There's still a lot of hype about 5G. The Consumer Electronics Show is going on right now, and they're still talking a lot about it, a lot of buzz. That was happening last year, although this year there's actually things that have happened in the 5G area that we can talk about, things that are real world right now. So we're going to be covering that today, and just basically what's going on right now, kind of the state of 5G and what we're looking at for 2020. So, what is it? if you look down at the comments on this video, the very first comment there is a link to a broadcast that I did last decade, on 5G. So there's a little bit more, I go into a little more detail on what 5G is and how it works in that broadcast if you want to know that. But as far as where it's going, this is a good video for that. So what is it? So 5G, the G is generation. It's not gigabits per second. It's generation, next generation of cellular wireless communications. But they say that it could go up to 10G at some point, 10 gigabits per second, although I think what we're seeing is really more along the lines of maybe up to 1 gigabit per second, maybe 1.5. But I think real world we're seeing under 1 gigabit per second right now. There's a couple of different ways that it's deployed, or could be deployed, I should say. The way it's starting out, because we've got these cellular operators that have got networks that are already existing, they're LTE networks, is what's called non-standalone 5G or 5G NSA. And what that means is that they're using their current cellular infrastructure, their LTE infrastructure, but they're overlaying 5G radios on top of that. So that's the way things are started. And then eventually they'll have some they'll have, standalone, not non-standalone, but standalone 5G, which will be a 5G network that's built kind of from the ground up. It'll have the 5G core network. That'll be the radio access network that it uses. Now, Gartner is predicting $4.2 billion in revenue from 5G in 2020, and they're saying that it'll be 12% of the wireless infrastructure. So this is something that is going to be taking off here in 2020. Now, because of this non-standalone, we're seeing it deployed in different ways. The standalone architecture, I don't think we're going to see much of that in 2020. What we may see are a few private network deployments. This would be not maybe so much a carrier, it could be a carrier, but somebody who's actually deploying 5G technology in a private kind of network, like maybe a warehouse situation where you've got lots of different sensors and kinds of things, and they want a 5G network in there, and it's going to be displacing Wi-Fi that they might ordinarily use. Now, I did a broadcast several weeks back on Wi-Fi 6, and with Wi-Fi 6, with the advent of that, I don't know if that's really going to be an opportunity so much for 5G, because Wi-Fi 6 is going to have higher speeds and low latency like 5G, so we'll have to see. But right now, there's a lot of buzz. Like I said, there's a lot going on in the market. Different carriers have different ways that they're promoting it and rolling it out. Really what they're trying to do right now is try to gain market share, but really more so I think they're trying to gain mind share. They're trying to get everyone to believe that they are the leader in 5G, and that's kind of what we're seeing, and they're doing it different ways, and can be kind of hard to understand because they're deploying different technologies, which means different speeds and different limitations, different distances, those kinds of things. So let's talk a little bit about that and what people are doing. So we've got T-Mobile now. T-Mobile has just announced basically that they are a nationwide provider now of 5G service. So they've rolled it out, and they're claiming that they now reach 200 million, or I should say past 200 million homes They don't have that many subscribers, but that's what they can reach. And then they are about 1 million square miles of the country. So they are a nationwide provider now of 5G. But what does that 5G look like for them? Well, this is in the 6 megahertz spectrum. That's old TV spectrum that they purchased some time ago, a couple years ago, that TV stations are shedding, and they're still waiting on certain areas, like I think some areas of Florida and other places where they're waiting on some of that spectrum to become available. But they've purchased that spectrum as it becomes available, and again, that's in the 600 megahertz spectrum or frequency. They are rolling it out at the same price as their 4G. So with them, you really look at it as a mobile play. It's kind of an upgrade to their 4G LTE service, not charging more for it. Of course, you can't just pick up your regular 4G phone and connect to this and get the 5G benefits. You have to have a 5G phone, and those are kind of scarce right now. T-Mobile now has 2 phones that they are promoting with 5G. One is the new One Plus phone. I think it's One Plus 7, and then the other one is the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus 5G. So that one is out as well now. So you've got those 2 phones, and then you can get 5G, and you see the coverage area here. So it is pretty substantial what they're covering. Now, because it's in this 600 megahertz spectrum, there's really not a lot of increase in speed. You're talking about maybe a 20% increase in speed over their regular LTE network. And maybe that's one reason that they're not charging more for it. But I think the other reason may be that they're in the process of a merger with Sprint, and which I'll talk about here in a minute. So that might be another reason that they're trying to play nice and not charge more for this 5G service. So that's T-Mobile. Then you've got Verizon. Verizon's taking a totally different tactic here. They're not looking so much for a broad nationwide mobile play right now. What they're trying to do is target specific cities, and then really looking for some consumer access and then access in public areas. Here you see a coverage map where you're looking at what they've rolled out in Chicago, which is a kind of a big hub for testing 5G for several operators. And you see here you've got these red dots, which are public areas, and you've got the areas with bold lettering would be neighborhoods that they're covering. So in addition to being outside and getting this service, you can actually get it within your home. And again, it's kind of limited in the area. You can see here Chicago, it's not a very big area, but they have rolled it out to the city. And what they're doing is, again, they've got kind of a home play here. And at first they were using antennas that would be almost like if you're getting satellite TV. So you'd put it on the side of your house, then you'd have to drill through the wall and run wires into your home, just like you would with a satellite dish. You'd have an antenna, a 5G antenna on the outside of your home. But what they're doing now is they've got this window antenna, something that can sit on the outside of the window, and then it can communicate with a 5G router inside the home. So I think it might even be a Wi-Fi 6 router at this point. So it's giving you some pretty good Wi-Fi access within the home. Now, one of the things about 5G in this range, and the reason that they're doing it this way is they're using what's called millimeter wave, which is way higher than the 600 megahertz that we were talking about with T-Mobile. That's a 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz spectrum that they're looking at. So this is the 5G that everybody's so excited about. It's millimeter wave. It's going to be really, really fast, very low latency, but millimeter wave is also very short distances, and it doesn't go through walls or trees or it gets disrupted by humidity in the air, that kind of thing. So it's very short range. You need line of sight. So this antenna that you would mount on a window somewhere would need line of sight with a 5G small cell antenna somewhere outside. You know, again, this is small cells, very short distances. So if you think about what they are doing, what Verizon is doing, they are hitting these urban areas because that's where they can put lots of antennas very close to each other and they can have line of sight. So they have good, fast service, but one of the disadvantages is that because they're having to do this in urban areas, these are areas that already have good internet generally already, either from fiber or cable, or really usually both. So they've usually got a good fiber provider, there's usually a good cable provider there that are providing wired service. So by the time you get this 5G into the home, and then you're using Wi-Fi within the home, because again, 5G doesn't pass through walls, then you're talking about what's pretty much like a wired service. So this is another alternative. It's another option for people in these areas to get broadband. Now again, it's also nice that you can get it outside. So if you go outside with your 5G device, you can pick up your signal from your same provider, and then you go into the house and you have that through this particular setup right here. So that's what Verizon is doing. And again, the in-home experience is probably going to be similar to cable or fiber, but better than, let's say, T-Mobile. T-Mobile, again, more of a in-house play, but not nearly as fast as this, so not taking full advantage of what 5G can offer. Then you've got AT&T. This is interesting. So you see what they had here is their path to 5G, and the bottom one there, that 5G evolution. They were calling that 5GE, and what they did was they upgraded some of their LTE equipment, and then they decided, why don't we call that 5GE? But in reality, what they were doing was not really anything different than other operators were doing, other carriers were doing with their own LTE stuff that they had already done. So these other operators or carriers were calling it 4G, and they just upgraded their 4G network. And then AT&T made the same kinds of upgrades, and they called it 5GE. So pretty misleading, and they were actually sued by Sprint. That suit has since been settled, and they're still able to call it 5GE, but it's not really 5G. So you see here their path. They've got their 5GE or 5G evolution. Then they've got their LTE stuff. Then they've got what they're calling mobile 5G, and they're showing here, this is an older map, but they're showing what they had live in 2018 and planning to go live in 2019. So this is kind of their coverage map for their 5G stuff. So that's what AT&T is doing. Oh, and they also, by the way, they have the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus 5G. That's their particular phone. And that phone does not do millimeter wave, by the way. So if you want to do millimeter wave on your phone, you'd have to upgrade to something else later. Let's see, Sprint. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. This is what we're looking at here is kind of a comparison of T-Mobile and AT&T, again, on their more broad network. So not millimeter wave. Neither one is using millimeter wave. AT&T is using 850 megahertz compared to 600 megahertz, which T-Mobile is using. And you can see here again the coverage is kind of similar, where they have access. So that's what we're looking at with those two operators. Now Sprint, this is what they're showing. They're saying that they've got 16 million people covered in these various cities with 5G, and they're rolling it out in mid-band spectrum, while AT&T and T-Mobile are in low-band spectrum. Sprint is rolling it out in 2.5 gigahertz, so theirs is going to be faster. Tests are showing that they're over 200 megabits per second. What's interesting here with Sprint is they're kind of in the middle of this merger with T-Mobile, so things seem to be kind of on hold with them, and both they and T-Mobile are waiting to join together so that they can then share the spectrum that they have, and they will then be a stronger competitor to both AT&T and Verizon. Now, one requirement for that merger, this merger was approved by the FCC last year, but one of the requirements for that was that they would help another provider get in the market, which would be Dish Networks. So Dish is going to be getting into the cellular market, and they're going to be using or purchasing, I guess, or getting some of the resources from T-Mobile and Sprint as part of this merger. So that was one of the requirements for the FCC to approve that merger, but that merger is still in doubt because there are still, I think it's, how many cities is it? I think a dozen or so cities now have lawsuits that are trying to prevent this merger from happening because, again, they think that this is going to be bad for the consumer by getting one less competitor out there. Although, again, what Sprint and T-Mobile want to do is they're going to go ahead and make a new competitor in Dish. So Sprint right now is kind of, in limbo, waiting on this merger to happen, and we'll see if this merger does happen. I've seen estimates of it, the probability anywhere just barely above 50% up to almost 100%. as to whether this merger will happen. So we'll have to see what does happen with that in 2020. I believe it will go through. I think at this point it's a little far down the road for it not to go through. And with this new competitor of Dish coming in the market, I think that the states will eventually drop this suit and allow it to go through, or they'll lose the suit. So those are the various operators that are in it now. So what does this mean? Again, a lot of this focus is on mobile. So it's these carriers trying to say, hey, we've got 5G, and if you're one of our mobile customers, we don't want you to go to our competitor. We want you to stay with us. You're going to be able to get 5G with us. Again, T-Mobile offering it at the same price, but not very fast. But Verizon taking a little different approach, looking at the millimeter wave. AT&T, by the way, also doing millimeter wave in various cities, but they are limiting it to businesses. So AT&T is more looking at that as a commercial play, whereas Verizon is looking at it both ways, commercial, in-home with that antenna router combination that we saw. But what does it mean for in-home? Again, for ISPs, wired ISPs, I don't think there's a lot of threat. In rural areas, there may be some threat from somebody like a T-Mobile or an AT&T if they're not providing good service already. So if there's not already a good wired broadband operator in a rural area, that's great. You've got now 5G as an option from people like AT&T and T-Mobile. It'll be fast. It'll be something that will get into the home. It can go through walls, so that's a really good option. But if there's already a good wired operator there, then in these rural areas, the speeds that you're going to get, because this is not going to be millimeter wave, is not going to be that fast. So I don't expect in 2020 to see a lot of competition with wireline ISPs. There'll be those that are not happy. People will be dropping if they're not happy with their operator, either the price or the quality, that kind of thing. And maybe in urban areas going with somebody like a Verizon with millimeter wave, or in rural areas going with a T-Mobile or an AT&T if they don't have good service already. But I don't think that'll be a big thing that we'll be seeing in 2020. And then how do you get it, in the house? Well, this is new at the Consumer Electronics Show. Is Lenovo's come out with a PC called the Yoga. I think they've got Yoga PCs already, but this is the Yoga 5G. And this particular PC is a 5G laptop. So it's the first 5G PC out there. It's a 5G laptop. It will work with millimeter wave as well as the sub-6 kinds of ones that we're talking about from T-Mobile and those that are actually doing 5G. So it'll work with both of those. The question is going to be, is this an unlocked kind of PC? Will you have to get it from your carrier like you would at your phone? Or will it be something that will be unlocked and then you'll just sign up and like you would with an unlocked phone? So we don't know on that yet. We also don't know if this is going to be something that's going to increase the cost. I don't think so. This particular laptop, what they're saying is it's going to be about $1,500. It's going to be available in the spring. And they're also claiming that it's going to have a 24-hour battery life, which is nice. So on one charge, it can go for 24 hours. So again, in the home, this obviously you can take it outside if you're in one of these areas that's got 5G, especially millimeter wave. You go out on your deck, and wow, you can get really great service with your laptop, your 5G laptop. You don't connect to Wi-Fi at all. In the home, it's not going to be much use if you're talking millimeter wave. So in the home with millimeter wave, it's not going to pick that up. But if you've got somebody like a T-Mobile or an AT&T on these lower frequencies, then it would pick that up in the home, and you won't need to connect to your Wi-Fi. One more thing just to be looking for in 2020, because we saw it in 2019 as well, are some 5G activists. You might hear more about this as 5G starts to spread. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but people are always worried about the amount of cellular radiation in the air and holding your phone up to your head, and they're worried about 5G specifically because there's so many cell sites that you need when you're talking about millimeter wave. So in these urban areas, you've got these small cells that are going to be mounted on light poles on buildings, and they're going to be really close to each other compared to your normal cell towers. T-Mobile and AT&T, when they're doing those other kinds of bands, they're your typical kinds of cell towers distance-wise. But in this case, these small cells have got to be very close to each other, so you're going to be seeing a lot of these antennas in cities, and people are kind of upset about that. So we'll see where that goes. I don't think it's going to get traction, but we'll see as you hear about 5G deployments especially in the millimeter wave. You will probably hear more about some of this 5G activism, where they say, I think it's Stop 5G is basically what they're all organizing under, and you'll see that in various cities, I believe. So next week, we're going to be talking about 10G, which is Cable Labs, or DOCSIS. That's kind of their answer to 5G. That's their marketing. They're trying to one-up, I guess, 5-up the 5G thing with marketing. And in this case, G is really meant to be gigabits per second. So what this is the cable's answer to 5G, and saying that we're going to get up to 10 gigabits per second using various technologies within DOCSIS. So I'll be talking about that next week. So if you would like to make sure that you see that, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Just join us again next week, next Tuesday at 3 o'clock. You can also subscribe to our channel. Below this video, there's a button, and click that. And then also click the little bell. And then when I'm live, you will be notified of that. So that will be our next Tech Tuesday in this new decade. So I will see you then. Have a great day.